Andrew Kineen, Paddy Powers, NFL analyst and all-round American football super fan, joins me. We had the draft. There's nothing else going on in sport, but we had the draft. We've known who number one was going to be for a while, but we're going to go through the top 10. So first off, thanks for joining me. And we were meant to be in Paradise, Nevada. We ended up, much like we are now, on Zoom and Skype and all this kind of thing. Your initial thoughts?
On the pandemic or the draft?
We could be here all day with your pandemic thoughts. We're going to go to the draft.
From a purely selfish perspective, my team picked the player I didn't want, as is such the folly of sport. So that made the draft go considerably longer than it should have for me. As you can see, I'm half awake because of the draft, so it took its toll as well. So overall, some expected decisions. I think the top three generally went the way people thought it would. And then David Gettleman went on the clock, and all hell breaks loose, as you're well used to at this stage. The thing, I suppose, it's easiest to say, I think it's easiest to say at this moment probably that you play the board as much as you play the need and the player that you want. And realistically, Dave Gettleman, who's the general manager of the New York Giants, realistically what he could have done is, if he really wanted Andrew Thomas out of Georgia, he could have traded down several spots, picked up more draft picks to compile them, and still gotten Andrew Thomas probably at 10 rather than 4. But he doesn't work like that, so he didn't. And he picked Andrew Thomas, Georgia, out of 4. But if you want me to go through, do you want me to go through them individually, perhaps?
Well, I'll ask the questions and you can give me your expert opinion.
Wow.
I haven't a clue.
Excellent.
So, number 1, Joe Burrow.
Yeah.
From LSU Tigers, ends up at the Cincinnati Bengals, also a Tiger. The Tiger King headline writes itself for everybody. It's lazy.
Right.
I had to say it.
I know.
I really like this guy because he can run a bit, he can throw a lot, and he smokes cigars after big wins. What more do you want?
He does. So the big thing about Burrow and the reservations with Burrow were that he's done this for 1 year. It basically, his last year with LSU, people couldn't believe it. It was probably the best quarterbacking display of any college player I've ever seen. And it came from nowhere really, because I've seen personally now this is, but he left Ohio State because he couldn't win the job. And then he went to LSU as a transfer, and he's blown it up. Ohio State haven't had a ton of success at quarterback. Dwayne Haskins, maybe they went to Washington last year, is an exception. But he wasn't getting a look in. He went to LSU and won a national championship, and he was comfortably, to me, the best player in the country doing so, resulting in the Heisman Trophy win. But the biggest issue, like I say, was that it's been done for 1 season. But if you look into advanced metrics, his performance went up when he was under pressure. And that's very unusual, because normally when you have defenders running towards you, it clouds your judgment a small bit, and you react quicker, so you maybe don't get the throw off perfectly. Whereas Burrow went the opposite way. When he had more men coming towards him, and he was in single coverage with a lot of his receivers, he was putting the ball exactly where it needed to be, and that's just a really unusual trait in a quarterback. He was significantly higher than any other quarterback as well in college football doing so. So he, to me, was the de facto number 1 pick, because he's made throws, and not like Lamar Jackson did in college. At Louisville, Lamar Jackson ran the ball a lot, and he could throw certain routes, but you sometimes, to be successful in the NFL as a quarterback, you need to go to a situation where the scheme suits you. And I think Cincinnati and Zach Taylor can genuinely just bring him into their scheme and say, learn this, because he's that high of an IQ. So,
well, the scheme that Cincinnati had last year didn't work, so it didn't really matter who they had, really. So, number 1 pick, that was locked. Number 2, you mentioned 2, went the way we thought. Looking at my notes here, Chase Young, Ohio State. But for those that aren't as educated as your good self, positions are hard to lock down in the NFL. But what's an edge?
So an edge player. So I'll bring it through. So when we talk about defenses in the NFL, you talk about a combination of 2. So you either have a 3-4 or a 4-3. And what those are is, you see the big fellas in the front with their hands in the dirt ready to get the quarterback. You either have 3 of them or you have 4 of them. And the players that play behind them are called linebackers, as denoted by the second 3 or 4 in the combination. So Chase Young generally plays on the edge of the 4 in the guys in the dirt. So that refers to his edge particularly. or if you have 3-4, it's the guys on the edge of the four rather than the guys on the edge of the four at the front. So he is a defensive end at Ohio State, and basically his job is to stop outside runs, so any runs that go outside the tackles, and also to pressure the quarterback. And there hasn't been a better player to do it in a long time. You know, you're talking about going back to Von Miller and stuff, who's obviously had a Hall of Fame career now. But Chase Young was the de facto best player in the draft. You take Burrow ahead of him because of positional value, and the quarterback is probably the most important position in any team sport, I'd probably say, because they're the only player to touch the ball in any given play. So Chase Young is a freak athlete. He's got really good hands. And I think two of the standout pass rushers maybe in the last while done that have come into the NFL are probably the Bosa brothers at San Francisco and the Chargers. And what they are is technicians. So they use their hands to create space and to get off blocks from those big fellas at the front. But Young has a combination of that, but also raw athleticism. So he can bend his body in and around bigger blokes trying to block him. So if you have a combination of both, you can't just use one particular technique to beat you in any given play. So you don't really know what he's going to do. So I'd imagine the temptation was there to trade down and to pick up more picks. But at the end of the day, you're probably getting a player that will be on your team for 12 years and get you closer to a Super Bowl when the time comes. So that seemed pretty much standard.
Yeah, defensive leader for the team in Washington. Next up, Detroit Lions. Another Ohio State man, Jeff Okudah. Talk to us. He's a
Jeff Okudah. Yeah. So again, just a quick intro on what that is. So everyone knows what the receivers are. They're the fellas that catch the ball down the field. The cornerbacks, generally speaking, are the fellas who have to mark them. So you have to be as fast as them, and you can't touch them because you give away penalties. So in effect, you need to be a more skilled receiver to play cornerback.
Yeah, hardest job in the sport. Sure.
Yeah, I think so. And this guy, what you really need to have in these situations, you need high IQ to understand what the receiver you're marking is doing, because there'll be certain tells, like he might lean on his left side to tell you he's going on an inside route or whatever. But you need to meticulously study these things before a game. And then you're in a situation where you need really good hips because you need to turn on a sixpence basically at any given moment. And he's not the fastest cornerback I've ever seen. He's not the biggest cornerback I've ever seen, but he's got the best hips that I've seen in a long time. And if you have that, you can pretty much cover anyone. It's just a case of whether you're getting beaten speed-wise by a Tyreek Hill. That's an issue, but I don't think any cornerback in the NFL can stay up with him. But Okudah was the de facto best defensive back in this draft. And again, the temptation here to draft down or to trade down and get more picks would have been massive, but there probably just wasn't too many suitors. And as you'll see later on, we'll do maybe like a total at the end. The amount of receivers that went is people expected it to be high. So for every good receiver you have to have a good cornerback because it's the 1-2. And Okudah was the best cornerback in this draft class. So I mean, I have no problems with taking.
But Shakira has told us the hips don't lie, so fair play to him with his best hips you've seen. Next up, we won't spend too much time on this one because it hurts a lot, but I can see the logic behind it. New York Giants fan, as you can see here from Jersey, and there's a helmet there. Okay, Andrew Thomas from Georgia, offensive tackle. He's there to protect quarterback. He's there to create maybe a running lane for Saquon Barkley, but is it really what the New York Giants needed? We could be here all day telling you what the New York Giants need. What do you make of this pick? You touched on it already at the start because you didn't think it was going to happen. They were going to stay at 4, and they weren't certainly going to take him at 4. They could have waited and taken him lower.
Now, it's easy for me to say that on my positional rankings of the players, I looked at about 150 before this because I had extra time thanks to this situation we're in. But Andrew Thomas of offensive tackles, and again, for context, they're the fellas that have to stop the Chase Youngs of the world. He was the most, I suppose, NFL ready because his technique was refined. But he doesn't have the potential as maybe the other 3 did in the top tier of offensive tackles. He was at Georgia, so he was protecting Jake Fromm, who will probably go in day 3, maybe day 2. It's a quarterback from Georgia. He's very good against the run. He's actually quite mobile for the size of him. And it's a safe pick, and that's what I'll say. you generally don't have to go safe at 4 when you believe the player that is at 4 can be gotten at 10. So, for example, we'll tell you who was at 10. The Cleveland Browns come up, and they really like a different player. Say Isaiah Simmons, who ended up going, I think, 8 to the Cardinals. They can come up and they can trade you for that number 4 pick, right? And then you pick up their 2nd round pick, their 3rd round pick, and maybe their 6th round pick. So you get all those additional players, and you probably end up with the player you wanted anyway. But some general managers will be risk averse, and they will just take the player they've put all these hours into with their scouting departments. And it's hard to knock it because Andrew Thomas is probably going to have a good NFL career, and he will have the biggest impact of all the offensive linemen day one. But as you know, it's not really about day one for the Giants. It's going to be about who can be a really good player in 5 years when potentially you have a chance at winning games again.
There's a less said about the Giants, the better. Traditionally there's a lot of Miami Dolphins fans, certainly around my own age, based on Dan Marino's legacy. So a lot of people had a huge amount of interest in the Finns, picking at number 5.
Yeah.
They went with somebody who's either going to be, will he probably be the subject of a 30 for 30 in years to come on ESPN, either because of how well it's gone or because of how bad it's gone. Known affectionately as Tua from Alabama, injured going into this draft. Discuss.
Do you want to have a go at pronouncing his surname?
Tagovailoa.
It's not bad. It wasn't terrible.
I'm a commentator. I have that spelled out phonetically.
Oh well, there's no doubt about it. Tua Tagovailoa is a good player. The most efficient quarterback in college football history, I think. So he just doesn't throw interceptions. His completion rate for receivers catching the ball from him is exceptionally high. His ball placement is ridiculous. He's obviously mobile. The problem is he had that hip injury, and he had a couple of smaller injuries too that you can effectively write off.
It's a big hip injury. It was a big hip injury.
It is a big hip injury. Isn't it? Bo Jackson had similar.
There was a fear about loss of blood around the hip joint and everything. It was a serious. He's great. He's back. He's ready to throw. But do Miami need a guy like this with that kind of history, injuries? You say a couple you can forget about, but also do they need a guy like this because he could be the face of a franchise for years to come?
I'm going to give you a bit of advice that I'd probably try to give the general public as well, as probably listen to doctors before forming an opinion. But I'm not going to sit here and make up all these medical, these medical excuses for him. I don't know, but the teams know. And their doctors are far more qualified to give an opinion than most people who were giving out about picks. And the Miami obviously felt comfortable with what their doctors presented to them. And it's hard to argue with that. The quarterback himself is a bit undersized. He's 6 foot. And as you know, if you've got some really big offensive linemen standing in front of you, I think they took Austin Jackson to pick 18. And he's a big boy, and he's 6'6". You're trying to see over him. It can be difficult. Now, that logic can apply as well to Drew Brees and Russell Wilson, who would probably be Hall of Famers. So it's just about managing your depth perception. You might have to stand further back from the line to see over them, but you can make these. These adjustments. Tagovailoa was the player I wanted from my team, who were picking next, and I would be appreciative if we could skip that. But he is the best quarterback not named Joe Burrow in this draft, and it seemed pretty straightforward. The thing with him, and this is the big one, he has a redemption story now. So you get increased media attention with him. You will sell 1 million jerseys because of the amount of letters in his surname, and everyone loves that. And then he's
in Tom Brady's market now as well.
He's in Tom Brady. Yeah, he is. Wow.
Phenomenal storyline, yeah. The brilliant storyline. Tom Brady at the Bucs, he's at the Dolphins.
It's great. And I'm looking forward to seeing it. But ideally you go into a situation with Tagovailoa's injuries and you're sitting for 7-8 months just to watch and learn. Now, as it turns out, with the way America is at the moment, he could well be sitting for 2 years. But it's a situation where, because you want to heal the injury, you want to absolutely guarantee that you're perfect in health, or as perfect as you can be, before taking up a job like that, especially in that division as well. They've got some really tough defensive linemen. You kind of want him to learn and sit from a quarterback who's been there for some time. and he probably won't be afforded that in Miami because the pressure to roll him out day one is going to be massive.
Yeah.
He had incredible weapons around him at Alabama, even more than Joe Burrow had at LSU, to be honest.
Judy gave him massive
Yeah.
downfield length, just fire it out there and he'll catch it kind of thing, which is classic college. But
exactly. And he also had the best, we're going back to Andrew Thomas again, but he had the best left tackle, in my opinion, in the draft as well, in Jedrick Wills. I mean, Alabama, have constantly had the best recruiting drives in the country for some time. So he's always going to be surrounded by talent. But you kind of want to take away his best games and his worst games and focus on the ones in the middle. That's what I generally find works best for these situations. And it's just efficiency, And generally, if you have a good enough team around a quarterback and he doesn't give the ball away, he doesn't throw interceptions, you're probably going to win a lot of games. And that's even if he doesn't reach his potential, because if he reaches his potential, he'll be a top 5 quarterback. He'll be a top 5 quarterback in the league. I worry about the injury, but Miami didn't, so I shouldn't. That's the way I look at it.
We won't spend too long on the next one, but the rule of thumb going into this was that the Chargers on the block at 6 were going to take the quarterback that the Dolphins didn't. Try not to get too emotional now when I did tell you that Justin Herbert from the Oregon Ducks was the guy that the Chargers went with to replace Philip Rivers.
Yeah. Next. No. He is
he's intelligent. He got a 4.01 GPA.
Yeah, he did. Congratulations. Yeah, I mean, in reality, he's not a brain surgeon now. He's a quarterback, but I've watched him countless times with Oregon, and to be honest with you, he might have had the best arm in the draft. His arm power is ridiculous. It reminds you of Brett Favre. Not quite Pat Mahomes, but in that conversation at least. So he can make any throw in the field. It's just a case of him and his. Funnily enough, with the GPA, he doesn't seem to process defenses quick enough, and he just doesn't really understand it. So yourself, Dan, if you've got 2 safeties deep and you're the player, you just look up and you say, right, they're probably playing cover 2 or cover 4. But in the NFL, safeties rotate, so they're giving you different looks, and you're trying to break down what defense they're in so you know what route to go through to what receiver, and I just think that confuses him ever so slightly. Now, again, the one thing you can give him and you can afford him is that he didn't have Joe Burrow's supporting cast at LSU, and he definitely didn't have Tua Tagovailoa's supporting cast at Alabama. But I don't know. He's thrown far too many interceptions in this. He makes stupid decisions. And the biggest worry of all of this for me is that how many times he's had a wide open receiver and missed him. And if you can't hit the barn door with no cows in front of it, how are you ever going to hit it when the cows are off to be milked?
Right, moving on quickly. Carolina Panthers up number 7. Derek Brown, defensive tackle, Auburn.
Yeah, so we talked about the 4-3 defense. They're the blokes in the middle. They're generally the biggest players on the defensive side of the ball. They take up space, they stop the run, and some of them at least have a good enough motor and good enough hands to be able to actually affect the quarterback as well in passing plays. Brown came out, I believe, of Auburn. Is that right?
Auburn, yeah.
Yeah, and when he was coming out, he was the big thing. He was the best player in the interior defensive line. And there was a player I liked considerably more called Javon Kinlaw, who we won't talk about. He's actually out of the top 10. But he had a better skill set. I thought he had better potential. My mate, actually, who I ended up watching this with last night, he's a big Panthers fan, and he was disgusted because you couldn't trade down and get Brown, but there did seem to be a better defensive tackle in the draft, not by consensus, but by maybe our own opinion.
Does this mean that because of the whole Cam Newton thing with the Panthers that they've drafted this tackle that they're going to maybe do a lot of trading in the offseason now to fill in certain slots that need filling that they couldn't fill in the draft? Experience, maybe.
Yeah, well, you see, the thing is, they got a new head coach who's effectively going to be the general manager for them, called Matt Rule. And he what he does is he goes into programs at college level. He went into Temple and he went into Baylor, 2 medium to big size college programs, and he ripped them down from the inside and built them up, and they've both been success stories under his guidance. So he'll do the same thing at Carolina if he's given the keys. Derek Brown, it's not a sexy pick at all by any stretch. It's just not one of the things that's going to make you excited. He's probably going to have a good NFL career. He doesn't have injury concerns like Kinlaw does. But I think we've probably seen the best of what he can be. But then again, NFL general managers are comfortable picking that. Potential kind of scares people a small bit when you're in a prime slot like the Panthers were, and you don't want to, I suppose, draft a player for what he could end up being in 5 years.
Yeah, when you're not there.
Yeah.
Number 8, Arizona Cardinals went with Isaiah Simmons, linebacker, which came out of Clemson. The Clemson Tigers, good couple of years there, obviously, for Clemson. We spoke about like the sexy positions of running backs and wide receivers and quarterbacks, but to take someone like a linebacker, this guy's talent for the Cardinals means they're building too.
Yeah. So the thing with Simmons, what general managers and coaches kind of seem to covet more and more is players who can play different positions. And Isaiah Simmons, he's a Swiss Army. Like, he can do everything. They put up his chart of the positions he played at Clemson last year, and he played 180 snaps at slot corner, so the corner that sits in the middle with the receiver rather than the outside. He played snaps at free safety, strong safety, inside linebacker, outside linebacker, and he played like a normal perimeter cornerback as well. And he obviously blitzed a considerable amount. He was probably the best player at Clemson at doing all of those things. And if you have someone like that, to be honest, that was the pick I wanted the Chargers to make if they didn't get to it with Tagovailoa. It's the pick I think the Giants should have made at 4. Because in the NFL, you've got so many moving parts, and you have to remember these players are just chess pieces for people who design plays. And so often what they do is they get their group of players up against a certain group of players in the defense, and they find mismatches. So I think everyone here knows Rob Gronkowski is back in the news again. He is 6'5", 6'6", probably weighs 260 pounds. And if you scheme it correctly, he could be up against a guy who's 5'10" and 185 pounds. All you have to do is throw the ball in the air and it's done. Isaiah Simmons is quick enough, big enough, and clever enough to kind of stay with any player you could possibly throw at him.
Yeah, plus when you look over your offensive lineman and see him standing in different positions for every snap, and you having a clue where he's going, who he's picking up, and then audibles come into it, and it's an absolute mess for offensive coordinators.
There's a couple of players in the NFL like him. So Tyrann Mathieu with the Chiefs, he was massive to them win the Super Bowl last year because he could play linebacker in dime pack, he could play deep safety, strong safety, blitz. Derwin James does the same thing for the Chargers. He just plays everywhere, and your offense is deciding at the start of a snap, throw the ball where he isn't, so he can take away half a field just by being available. And Simmons is that kind of player. I thought it was the best pick in the top 10.
There you go. Now, the best pick in the top 10 for me was the next one because I had money on this, thanks to you, which is a great tip. Jacksonville Jaguars went with C.J. Henderson, cornerback out of Florida. You were on to me during the week saying this guy's going to go earlier than many people think. No one, all the mock drafts I'd seen, no one had this guy in the top 10, did they?
Yeah. I think people think too hard about cornerbacks. The amount of receivers that were in this draft told me that there's going to be a run on cornerback somewhere. I think AJ Terrell from Clemson went at 16 and he shouldn't be in the first round. It's just, you panic in situations, especially if teams in your division are taking receivers, because you have to beat them twice a year to be in a Super Bowl, well, on average. And someone like Henderson, I think he was out of the top maybe 15, 16 cornerbacks available in the draft, he was the quickest. And again, he does not have the hips Akuta has. He can get a bit stuck on routes. But for example, the way the NFL is, if you're on third down, right? Say you're the defense and you're facing a 3rd and 6, and you want to bring pressure because the offensive line isn't that good. You want to send 6 men, which means you've got 5 men on the back end responsible for 1 player. And if that player is Kansas City Chiefs Tyreek Hill, who is the one player on the field that can keep up with him, and that is C.J. Henderson. Because he's that quick. Florida, it's a tough program to be in as well. They coach it within an inch of your life. So he's going to have discipline. Where he struggles a small bit is when he has to think too much. So if you put him in a man-to-man assignment, he knows wherever he goes, I follow him. But if you ask him to play cover 4 inverts, which is obviously sounds gibberish to most people watching this, but he has to know what that is, and he won't know his responsibility.
Marking space at a corner is the easiest way to...
Yeah, take up space, and if anyone goes into your space, you hit. Yeah.
Well, actually, a lot of rugby defenses could buy into that kind of thing. I want to get on to the drafted general, so we'll just finish off number 10, Cleveland Browns.
Best value pick. Like he was the best
Jedrick
offensive
Wills
tackle.
from Alabama. Yeah, the talent coming out of Alabama, as you say, but this is an offensive tackle. This guy is the real deal.
He, like I said, Andrew Thomas was the best day one starter. I feel like this fella's clever enough to be the best day two starter. He picks up things so quickly. He's got an unbelievable anchor. And when you're in the SEC, Don, it's a conference in college football. You play the best of the best week in, week out, especially in terms of pass rush. And generally, because you know Alabama will be in the top four nearly every year, he's going to play in high-pressure games against the best edge rushers in the country, and he did. And it was comfortable enough for him. He never looked out of place. And he's the best thing about him, I suppose, is that he's equally effective in the run game and the pass game. And that just doesn't happen a whole lot for players. You know, they have a specialty, one or the other, and you draft depending on your offensive scheme, but he does everything. And to me, if the Giants didn't want to go Isaiah Simmons at 4, they thought this was the slam dunk pick. But, you know, I think for him to fall to 10 is concerning about scouting departments, because I don't think he had a bad snap at Alabama. So,
as you said, there might have been a bit of panic lower on the board once Andrew Thomas went at 4. So maybe he got dropped off a couple of depth charts. So that was the top 10. 3 QBs, an edge, 2 cornerbacks, 2 offensive tackles, defensive tackle, and a linebacker. Obviously, there's 32 picks in each round. It'll go on longer than the two of us wish it does. I'm sure people, you know, who are watching this will only have interest in those top 10, rightfully so, because it is what it is. But outside of that top 10, give me, before we wrap up, your best pick outside the top 10, someone that you think, they picked up someone good there, and then someone you can't believe is in the top 32.
Okay, so I thought the best player picked in the top 32, I think I was quite vocal about him on Twitter, was Clyde Edwards-Hilaire. If you followed any of the tips on Paddy Power, I had him at 12-1 to be the first running back drafted, and it came in. Just patting myself on the back there quickly. He is, you know, Christian McCaffrey at Carolina. He is effectively what he is, but he's slightly slower.
Just for people watching this that don't really get, you know, college football and American football on this, right? So you've 6'6" guys, you're talking about Gronkowski. Just leave everyone know, you're 12-1, first running back in the draft. What height is he?
He's 5'8".
Yeah, love that.
Yeah.
He's now my favourite player. He's the same size as me, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah. Small bit faster.
Small bit. I've seen you run track, like yourself and Dave Mahidi out doing the sprints.
Dave Mahidi's faster than me, but go on.
Dave Mahidi's faster than most people.
Yeah.
No, he's 5'8". He's about 210 pounds, but you should see the moves he has from some stationary. His acceleration is ridiculous. And I think a lot of the time with running backs, if you're not fast enough, you probably won't finish the runs. But if you can accelerate enough, you're through a gap, and that matters more. He's also a phenomenal pass catcher. Like, he probably would have been my 5th highest receiver if he was a receiver in the draft. So to consider the Kansas City Chiefs, who definitely don't need offensive firepower, have now added him to their scheme with Pat Mahomes, you can probably write off the Super Bowl at the moment, to be honest with you. A couple of players I didn't really like. So the Seattle Seahawks picked up Jordan Brooks, which seemed strange to me at the time, because Patrick Queen, who was at LSU, we spoke about them, he's a better linebacker, but Seattle generally pick really strange. Their scouting department, I think they buy a lot into culture and what it means to be a Seahawk. I mean, I think that's a load of absolute rubbish, because your mottos will change by your departments when they switch over. Your new general manager will think another thing, and if you just are a good player and you've got high IQ, you'll last. I didn't love that. A pick I really liked outside of that, away from Hilaire, was Jeff Gladney at 31 to Minnesota. He's probably the best true slot corner in the draft, and that, like I said, that means the marking the receiver closest to the quarterback when there's 2 or more. But he's a serious talent, and the fall at 31 was surprising to me. I think a lot of mock drafts had him in at 18, 19, again, because of the run and corners we spoke about. But I think maybe actually the best fit of the entire draft was Cesar Ruiz, who he went to New Orleans Saints. Again, not a sexy pick. He's the guy that snaps the ball back to the quarterback, called a center. But phenomenal athlete, and his story was, I don't know how many people actually watched the draft last night. This probably came on screen about 4:30 in the morning, so I think I'm probably the only person deluded enough to watch it. But he had quite an emotional story as well, where his father was killed when he was younger, and it seemed like a really nice arc, I suppose, for him to get to this place and to go to New Orleans as well, where they're kind of such a closed environment. It seemed like a good fit for him. So yeah, I'm gonna go take a 4-hour nap.
Nice little story to finish on. So it goes on for obviously another couple of days. I know you'll be glued to it. If anyone who is watching this and is still here, we're over half an hour in, give us some questions on social media, obviously Andrew and myself, and we'll come back maybe next week or the week after when we know more about who took who and see who ended up winning the draft overall. But for now, Andrew, thank you very much, and enjoy number one, getting some sleep, and number two, the rest of the rounds. I look forward to seeing your hot takes across social media and all of those.
#hot takes. Right.
Good luck.
Go on. Mind us.